Hey, 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 your part. Hey, 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 just singing, hey, 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 hey. Hi, this is Rik Palieri, and welcome to another chapter in the Songwriter's Notebook. And this is the second part of the grand interview with Nora Guthrie. And we are just having so much fun that the time is rolling by, and we had so much more to talk about, Nora. Yeah. We just got started.
Okay.
We just got started because,
hey,
we were talking about basically the creation of the archives. And I think it's so important for people to understand. I think, in my life, it was one of the proudest moments that I had to be in your archives and doing research. It was magical because you got lost in the words.
Yeah.
You were sitting there, and because I was researching for the Almanac Singers project, I really felt like I was back there again, reading your dad's writings.
And you could see the coffee stains on the paper, or the thing where the cigarette was put out. It really comes to life in a very visceral way. And it's funny when you talk about the way we organized the archive, the lyrics section, we organized it alphabetically. So when a lot of people would come in, I worked with a lot of musicians, and when they come in, they say, well, let me start at A, and I go, please don't. Everybody starts at A. And by the time they get to C, they're exhausted. Could somebody start with P? We used to direct them and say, please, start with P, start with Z. And they go, Z, songs with Z? I think, there's a lot of titles with Z.
Why don't we go, I remember the first time that I visited the archive, you gave one of the kind of tours that you do for visiting musicians. And the first thing you did was you brought out that Leadbelly record. That wasn't really a Leadbelly record. It was a different cover that he had painted over.
Yeah.
And then when you said, now, when you opened it up, he covered every corner, crack, inch of that with all kinds of writings.
Yeah. I think my father was, I don't know if there's an illness called pencil obsessed or pen obsessed. He loved the sensation of writing. I often think that he loved the sensation of writing so much that he kept thinking of things to write, like which came first, the sensation or the words. And his songs, usually, he conceived of it in his head before he would write them down. But the other thing that a lot of people don't know is that he often wrote anywhere between 3 to 5 songs a day. That's how much he liked the sensation of the pen on paper. He also wrote, in addition to lyrics, essays and diary entries and articles and books and short stories. And it was just this, he had a cartoon that he drew, and it's a guy, the cartoon is a guy sitting there writing, and underneath it says, writing, tracks behind a leaking mind. And it was a self-portrait of just someone.
And he liked to draw, too.
Anything that involved pen and paper.
Do you remember him sitting there and writing like that?
He had, in the hospital, we used to bring him a lot of writing paper, legal pads, and also the pens that had 4 or 5 ballpoint pens that had 4 or 5 different colors, and you push them out. Yeah. So we have a lot of lyrics that are like the blue period or the red period or the green period. But that also goes back to the fountain pens that he used to use in the 30s and 40s. And you could actually tell what period of time he wrote that lyric in by the ink that he was working with, or the pen he was working with at the time. But it was just really, we're sitting here for one reason, is because I'm up here doing this program about Pete Seeger. And just, my father was the kind of journalist. That was his function in the whole thing. And Pete and the other musicians were like the radio, the disseminators, because my father really didn't record that much. It's really shocking, actually, that he didn't record as much. He only did one official album in his life, which was the Dustwall Ballads, which was only 11 songs, actually, in 1940 he did. But Pete was the one who he would take the songs and he would be the one to sing them. So that's why when I found a lyric, I would say, Pete, did you ever sing this? Do you know anyone who ever sung this? And just getting back to what we were talking about before, I thought it would be very interesting to bring in what people might call Woody's children, or people who, I wanted people that would see eye to eye with him. I didn't want someone who would look up and go, oh, I'm going to do a Woody Guthrie lyric. I wanted someone who, like, I get it. I feel the same way. I could have written that song myself. So, and there's 3,000 lyrics. There's a lot of different topics.
Yeah.
So no one singer could possibly embrace all these different topics, I think. Writing them is one thing, performing them is another. So the first people I started working with was Billy Bragg and Wilco. That was the first record I did.
And everybody was surprised at the reaction was so favorable.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of those songs are now have entered the tradition.
Yeah.
And that's the way that they're sung.
Yeah.
And that,
well, again, you try to match it up with like the soulmate. It's like Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's like you try to put these people together, not based on fame or anything like that, but who would be the blood brother of the time? Who could have written that lyric so that when they sing it, it sounds authentic? Like I just did an album with Del McCoury a couple of years ago with some of Woody's kind of bluegrass themed songs, country western kind of themed songs, and the language is so geographically located that you can't have someone from New York singing hoe cakes and fritters. I ain't gonna do. Like it would sound false, and contrived. So that became my without me planning any of this, Rick. I literally fell into this by looking through a box and going, oh my God, look at that. That's how it started. And then I found another one and I went, oh my God, look at that. And then just started reaching out to different musicians and saying, I was supremely surprised to find any of this stuff. It had not been in my history. I never heard about it, anything like that. And I just went, ugh. And I think it was that kind of sense of discovery that gave it the whole project the energy.
But there's also this discovery.
Yeah.
Which this is another one of those projects that was a surprise. And you want to talk about this because this really changed things for you in a lot of ways.
Well, all of these projects, I feel like everything is like my personal diary. When you ask me how I feel about my dad, just follow. It's all there because they each follow my sense of discovery of like, oh my God, I found a whole trove of material that had Jewish themes when we were living in Brooklyn. It was a Yiddish-speaking community. And suddenly I'm finding lyrics of my father's called like, Nasho, Nash on my Humintash. I'm like, really? The Blinza tree, where did that come from? Hanukkah flame, just one after the next. So as I would discover that, I go, well, what do I do with this stuff? I want people to know, again, it's part of for me, it's like an educational tool. Like, how do I tell people? Do I just sit here and talk about it? No, that's not going to work. I worked with a group, the Klezmatics, and put out 2 different albums of Woody's Jewish songs, and they won a Grammy for one.
Yes.
So it's always been that kind of my sense of kind of following me. What am I discovering? And this one that you're talking about, this was an absolutely wild story.
Yes.
And if you can see on the cover here, this is a metal cylinder, photograph of a metal cylinder. And within a few months after 9/11, I got a package in the mail at the office. There was a brown craft paper, kind of weirdly boxed with string. And at the time, they were putting out notices with anthrax and all this stuff was happening, like, do not open strange boxes that get delivered to you. We don't know what it is, could be a bomb, whatever. This was really, really heavy, and I went, oh my God. I called the archivist. I said, you're the archivist, open this. Like, I'm not touching that. Long story short, we opened it, and inside were 4 metal cylinders of these. And they're about this big, each one. And wrapped around the cylinders was tiny, tiny, tiny thin wire about the size of one of my hair. And it kind of looks just like that. And when you pull on it, it squiggles just like that too. Anyway, all it said was Woody on it. And it turns out it was a wire recording that was made in 1949. And we had it transferred, but there were no wire machines to transfer it at the time.
Can you explain what a wire recording is? Because I don't think that a lot
I don't know what it is. It's a spool. It looks like when you go fishing, you know, the thing with the thingy going around. And for a brief period of time in history, they looked like a tape recorder, but it was made out of wire. And that's how they would record, on these very thin pieces of wire. And it didn't last long. The tape machine took over after the wire recordings. So it was really hard to figure out, first of all, what is this? Is this a fishing spool? And why does it say Woody on it? Because he didn't fish. So there was a lot of sleuthing that had to go, and then to find how do we transfer this. And because it's a wire, you only transfer it once. There's no double takes. If the wire breaks, that is it. So we found someone who in his basement had created a wire transfer machine attached to a computer. So we were able to transfer it for the first time. But what you were talking about was so meaningful, is that I heard my parents' voice, my mother and my father. My mother is interviewing him at a public program, and she's asking him questions about his songs and where he comes from, and he's answering and singing. And for me, the child, I never heard them talk like that because of Huntington's. They talked about different, here there were 2 normal people, just like, so Woody, blah, 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 blah. Well, Marge, you know, do. So I just started crying right away. I was like, wow, there's my parents in love, talking for the first time. Sent it to Arlo, my brother, and we just went, oh my God. So it turned out it was a live performance that he was doing, and it's the only live performance that I had ever known. Again, it's in the late 40s. He's already developing signs of Huntington's. So there's a little slurred speech, there's hesitations on the guitar. It wasn't his best and finest performance, but it is Woody Guthrie. And the other thing that was incredible to find out was that the way he introduced his songs were pretty long. He would tell these long stories, why he wrote it and where he came from and doodle-a-doo. And I thought, oh my God, this is like my brother. This was like Arlo, the way he introduces and talks on stage. And Arlo had never heard this. He had never heard his father perform. So I went, that is definitely genetic. I mean, the talking and the humor. He was very, very funny, very, very charming. And I thought that was very important for people to know, that Woody as an entertainer was actually very entertaining, because I think people think of him as a kind of dry, Dust Bowl, serious, not talkative kind of guy. But you hear in the performance, he talks for 10, 15 minutes, and my mother has to say, so play the song already. Come on, Woody, get to it. Oh, okay, you know.
That was the best part for me, is just listening to your mom try to get Woody back on track again.
He rambles, he goes from, I mean, if you, people that know Jack Elliott, you know, this idea that you start out here and you end up at a boat and then it goes there, and then somehow it does always come back to it, but it's, you know, you're really moving around a lot, and Mom has to constantly get him back on track. And that also was very much part of their relationship and probably his success, because she was able to say, get back on track, tell the story, write the story. She would leave notes on the refrigerator of what he should do every hour of the day. Wake up at 9, have a cup of coffee at 9:30, do this at 10, tune your guitar at 10:15, write a song at 11. The whole day was sketched out for him because he could very easily get distracted, you know. So she had to really keep him in check. The other family story she used to tell was he would go out for a pack of cigarettes and come home 2 weeks later. And the reason being was he would run into someone in the street and say, well, you know, there's a rally up at 14th Street. Why don't you come? And he'd go, okay, yeah. He'd go up to the rally. At the rally, he'd meet one of the people who was in the boycott. Oh yeah, well, there's a boycott down in Philadelphia, and we're going to meet tomorrow morning at 9. You should come. Okay, we're jump in the car. And one thing would lead to another, but that's where he got his material from. That's why he wrote the song about the rally and 14th Street and the Westinghouse boycott, blah, blah, blah. So
now another interesting project, I'm going to grab this one here, is My Name is New York. And this is a very, we had started talking about that a little bit earlier on, that you sort of would like to give people little tours around New York City and tell people where certain things happen. And along with this comes just an incredible CD that when I put it on, it floored me. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Why? Because
you know all of this.
I know, but you know, it was really great how you were able to mix the music in with the dialogue. So you talked about the places, but then you actually gave people a real insight into the song and made you feel like the neighborhood was coming alive.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, you know, this was, and that's the kind of thing that you're seeing, you know, as you look through all of these things. And we can't forget your husband, Michael Kleff. You know, Michael Kleff from Germany, he was really getting people in Germany involved in Woody's music. And you should talk about Wenzel.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say this is a really good example of what I was trying to talk about before, about filling a void. Because as I was looking through all these lyrics, in addition to finding they were on so many different topics you wouldn't believe, I looked at the bottom of the page and so many of them were written in New York. And I thought that the story of how Woody's life and career developed in New York wasn't fully painted yet. So I did this project. This is New York Woody. He's the New Yorker.
New Yorker.
He's the New Yorker. And what happened to him in New York changed music history, period. He had the first with Pete Seeger and with Millard Lampell and Lee Hayes, formed the first popular folk music group called the Almanac Singers on 10th Street and Greenwich Avenue, right in the heart of the village. This was predates Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio and all the groups that came after that in the 60s. So this is 1940. They became popular. They had hit radio shows and all kinds of stuff going on and brought folk music into urban lives. Before it had been on the porches and the back porches of, you know, country states. But they brought brought all of this stuff together from where they came. Lee Hayes from Arkansas, Woody from Oklahoma, Sis Cunningham, Lomax, and were able to create this brilliant sounding cacophony called what we now know or call folk music.
Right.
Which is how you got started, by being influenced by these groups.
Yeah, and what an influence they had on a young person, because they taught you that you could dream.
Yeah.
You could dream. You could be something different than you ever thought, and you could make a difference. I think that was the thing that really got me when I was a young kid, was that you could make a difference in this world if you just go out there and try. So one of the stories that Pete would tell me when I would go and visit with him, he would talk about the Almanac Singers a lot because he knew that I really enjoyed hearing about them. And he would talk about the Reuben James and how it got written. And I guess your dad was reading a newspaper, saw this article about the Reuben James getting, sunk, and having an interest in, in the topic. He went ahead and he dedicated a verse for, all the 100 men who went down. It said, and it was, during the Almanac days, and they're all sitting around, and there's like so many. how are we gonna actually sing this song? We need a chorus. That's what Peter. Well, it would be really good if you could write a good chorus, and then we can all sing along. And then somebody in the Almanac Singers said, what were their names?
What were their names? And that became the chorus.
Have you heard of the ship called the Good Reuben James? Ran by hard-fighting men, both of honor and of fame. She flew the stars and stripes of the land of the free, but tonight she's in her grave at the bottom of the sea. Tell me, what were their names? What were their names? Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What were their names? What were their names? Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What a great song, great song. And the thing is that Woody songs, and when I was just doing this project, that me and Rick Nessler are doing about steering Pete's course, we put 2 of Woody's songs on it, and immediately when we sang those songs, the whole room sang.
Yeah.
There's something about the way that Woody wrote a song.
You think you know it.
He just, the whole room just filled with everybody singing, and I think that's the thing that's so magical about Woody. And I wanted to tell you a story that Pete used to tell me. It was one of my favorite stories. He said that Woody was in Baltimore with Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and they were doing a rally for the war. They were going to fight the fascists, and so here it was an integrated group. You had Woody being white and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and they played the songs, and everybody was, great, this is wonderful. Everybody clapped, and and they said, Mr. Guthrie, we have a nice seat for you at the table, and we've set up a little table back in the kitchen for your friends. And your dad just looked at them. He said, you mean we can play you music, but we can't sit down together?
Yeah.
And he went over to the table, and he picked up the table and turned it over. And he went to the next table, and he turned it over. And he was shouting, this war against fascism is going to start right now.
Right here.
Right here.
So there's an aspect of my father's character that also might not be so well known, is that he was a fighter. His father taught him how to box and fist fight very early on in life. And he could squabble quite easily. And he was also, to some aspect, like undomesticated because he was on his own a lot. So certain etiquette, social etiquette kind of things, he didn't really pay attention to. He wasn't influenced by, actually. So he could be, if he felt something, he would just boom, he would take the table. If he felt like, this is wrong, I'm going to fight fascism. Now, he had just come off the Merchant Marines, where he was fighting fascism for 3 years on the Liberty ships. And so it's like you come back and you go, what about right here? Boom, I'm going to fight it with the same energy and with the same intensity that I would have fought the Nazis.
Right, and he had that sticker on his guitar. First he painted it on his guitar.
And he wasn't afraid to, he had a rifle. I know in these days you're not supposed to have a rifle, but he was down south with the Ku Klux Klan, and when they attacked, he shot back. And I've heard many, many stories about how he basically fought back in whatever way he could. And it wasn't just intellectual, it wasn't just verbal or writing an article or an op-ed. He was a real activist. And sometimes that would get him into trouble. And not only that, but sometimes it wasn't good and it wasn't right. But I'm just trying to tell you a little bit about his nature, that he could be a real squabbler when he wanted to. You couldn't stop him. You know, if he felt something, he just boom.
Hey, all you fascists, you're gonna be surprised. People all over this country, we're getting organized. Bound to lose, those fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose.
Fascists bound to lose.
People of every color standing side by side, marching through the fields where all the fascists died. These fascists, you're bound to lose. Let's try now. Whoa! All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. Now, Pete and Woody, they like to put in zipper songs, so they would slip into, you know, if it didn't have the right feeling in it, they'd just put new words to it, right? So I was figuring that we needed some new words right now for the song, because by God, there's all these fascists out there. Hey, you fascists, you think we're, wait. Hey, you fascists, we think we're going away, but we're getting stronger every day. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. Oh yeah. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. Yeah. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. Hey, all you fascists, your world's gonna reel and rock when we defeat you at the ballot box. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You're fascists bound to lose. But you know, we have to fit in the song about This Land Is Your Land, because we only have a few minutes left. Nora, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, it's a lovely story. When Woody first came to New York, it was February 16th of 1940. And I know that because he writes it was in the middle of a blizzard that he came to New York. And I checked in the weather almanac, and that's when the blizzard was. So he came to New York, and within the first week, he was living in a little flop house on 43rd Street and 6th Avenue called Hanover House. And he started writing out his impressions of his trip across country and also his impressions of the city. And one of the first things he wrote on February 23rd, just a couple of days after he arrived, was This Land Is Your Land. And he had conceived of it, traveling across the country. He had heard Kate Smith's God Bless America was #1 on the radio. And as he's traveling across, he's kind of looking around and seeing a lot of homeless people, a lot of hungry people. And he said, doesn't look like God blessed this country to me. And if anything, we're going to have to be the ones to not wait for God to bless us, but we got to get to work. And so he wrote This Land Is Your Land as his response to God Bless America. The original verse actually says, God bless America for me, or for you. And then he crossed it out and said, no, this land is made for you and me.